The apartment always smelled like her mother's cooking and her sister's certainty. Mira had learned early which rooms to enter quietly and which silences to fill without being asked. She was 19 the first time she noticed it clearly, how Anjali's tantrums rearranged furniture, plans, even birthdays. Mira's request dissolved into a familiar refrain. You're the sensible one. You'll understand by 24. She had stopped testing that theory. The scholarship had come to her the way good things sometimes do when you've stopped waiting for permission. Through a professor's offhand mention, a late-night application, interview she prepared for in the 15-minute gaps between work and the rest of her life. She told her parents only after she'd been shortlisted, and even then carefully, the way you'd mention rain to someone who didn't like getting wet. Her mother had said, "That's nice," a tone reserved for things she didn't yet think would happen. Anjali had said nothing at all, which Mira, in hindsight, should have read as its own kind of answer. The morning of the interview, the passport wasn't in the drawer. She didn't panic. Panicking had never gotten her anywhere in this house. She searched. Under documents, inside the old suitcase, in the kitchen drawer where important things sometimes migrated during her mother's cleaning sprees. It was in none of those places, and somewhere underneath her searching, a colder understanding was already settling. She found Anjali in the balcony, unbothered, scrolling through her phone like the morning owed her nothing. Where is it? Anjali didn't look up right away. I don't know what you're talking about. Mira didn't raise her voice. She'd learned that raising her voice only ever made her the problem in the story, never the wronged party in it. The passport, Anjali. A long pause. Almost bored. Maybe you should double-check before accusing people. Her mother appeared in the doorway before Mira could answer, drawn by the temperature of the silence rather than any noise. And when the truth did come out, slow, reluctant, pieces Anjali offered like she was doing everyone a favor. Her mother's face didn't hold the shock Mira had braced for. It held something worse, a kind of tired acceptance, as though this were simply weather to be waited out. She's going through a lot right now, her mother said. You know how she gets when she feels left behind. I have an interview in 3 hours. There will be other things for you, her father said, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse. Some opportunities aren't meant for everyone, Beta. Maybe this wasn't yours. Mira stood there long enough to understand that no one in the room was going to move on her behalf. She went back to her room and closed the door. Not dramatically, just finally. She missed the interview. She did not cry, not that day. Crying had always required an audience she could no longer justify providing. What her parents didn't know, what she'd told no one, not even the friend who'd helped proofread her essays, was that she'd applied to a second program months earlier, a smaller one, less prestigious on paper but real in every way that mattered. She hadn't mentioned it because mentioning things in this house had a cost, and she was tired of paying it in advance for things that might not even happen. 3 weeks later, the acceptance came. She read the email twice, alone, and felt something that wasn't quite joy, more like the quiet click of a lock finally turning the right way. She didn't announce it. She simply began preparing, moving through the apartment with a distance that felt less like sulking and more like leaving before she'd left. Her parents noticed. They read it as a mood to be waited out, the way they'd waited out every other inconvenient feeling she'd ever had. Anjali noticed too, though she said nothing, which by then had become its own kind of familiar language between them. The night of the ceremony, Mira wasn't home. Her parents were half watching the evening news the way people do when the television is more company than content. It was her father who saw it first. A segment on the National Youth Achievement broadcast, cutting to a hall, a stage, a name being read aloud that took a second too long to register as hers. The camera held on her for perhaps 4 seconds, composed, unaware of the room 400 kilometers away that had gone suddenly entirely silent. Her mother didn't say anything for a long time. Her father reached for the remote and then didn't press anything, as though turning it off might undo what they'd seen. Mira's phone rang later that night. She let it go twice before answering. We saw you, her mother said, and there was something in her voice Mira hadn't heard directed at her before. Not quite pride, not quite apology, something unfinished in between. Mira said. Not cold, not warm either, just accurate. There was no confrontation after that. No scene where accounts were settled and accountability distributed fairly. Anjali never apologized in words Mira could point to later. Her parents never quite named what they'd done, only orbited it in phrases like, we should talk, and come home soon. She did go home, eventually for a dinner some months later. She noticed, without needing to, how the room had rearranged itself slightly around her, how her father asked about her work instead of assuming it. Her mother didn't fill her silences with corrections anymore. Nothing was repaired in the way stories like to repair things, but something had shifted its weight, quietly, permanently, the way rooms do once someone in them has finally stopped asking to be let in. Mira ate her dinner. She answered questions when asked. She did not need, for the first time in longer than she could measure, to be understood by everyone at that table. It was enough that she understood herself, in that family ever said out loud,